An Italian monk created double accounting, and we still don't know how to use it. How long do you think we should be prepared to get integrated accounting, which really answers the questions that we need answering? And do we think possibly that the joint stock public company, if it can't adapt to long-term issues, may not be the dominant form of capitalist institution in 100 years' time?
Great, thank you. Why don't I take one other question, and then we can just have two of them at once.
Hi, Maya Forstatter. This is a question for Justin. I completely take your point about not just talking about who's the bad guys and who's the good guys, and I think most of us are here either because we are entrepreneurs or we work with entrepreneurs, and the big question of scale is how we make change amongst the incumbent industries. But I don't buy it that CCS and forest offsets are going to close that gap. I think we do have to find a way out of fossil fuels. And so just thinking about you and your position and positions of others like you within fossil fuel industries, and thinking about what David gave us as his sort of 5 things he was asking for, I was wondering, what would any of those 5 things change it for you in terms of, in your position within BP, being able to offer more than forest offsets and a technology which is way off in the future? And thinking about those 5, the one that seemed to me would make a difference is the stranded assets one, but I'd be interested to know what out of those 5 measures from the financial sector would make a difference to entrepreneurs in incumbent fossil fuel industries.
Great, thank you. So let's just take those 2 questions. So the first one's around integrated accounting and the time we've got to basically get there. So I'll start with David on that.
Okay. Can everybody hear me? Okay, good, thank you. I think integrated reporting, first of all, there are already some companies that are doing it. Believe it or not, companies like, Puma is a good example. It's probably the leader, but people like Southwest Airlines is doing integrated reporting. So there are some examples. We know that there's at least 3 initiatives, probably 4, that are going to accelerate this. And in our own view, that it could move very quickly, 2015 type of time frame. So I don't think this is 10 years or 20 years out. And there'll be voluntary steps. There already are voluntary steps. I think the second question was around.
It was really addressed to Justin, actually.
No, but he had 2 questions.
I missed your second video question.
Well, so what about if public companies...
Oh, yes, that's what I wanted to answer. Yes.
Will they still be the dominant form?
That is a really
question.
Insightful question and an important one. And what I've been really been focused on more recently is some of the new forms of companies. And there are increasingly other ideas. B Corps is an example. There's initiatives in California that actually will now state very categorically that the objective of the business is to be more sustainable and to have a broader set of company objectives. You can think of co-ops. There's a lot of examples of great business ideas, family-owned companies, et cetera, that have a different capital structure than a public company. And we will need to look at all of those for sure.
Great, thank you. Jeremy and Paul, do you have anything to add on that first set of questions?
Oh, well, I think I'd underline what David said, and that's one of the things that excites me when I look out there in the marketplace and you look at the growth of some of the people power type companies, the Zopas and the Kivas, and then you just look at the growth of peer-to-peer lending and this sort of thing. There's a real zeitgeist that if somebody can find a way to get the undergrowth to catch fire, you can really make a forest fire, and it would look very different and a lot sooner than I think you're saying. And my point is that if people like me who worry about the scope for additional shocks, if we're right, and of course let's hope we're wrong, but if we are right, then we'll be forced to take choices quickly, and it will be an environment which should favour clean energy. I would argue we're already seeing that in some of the problems of the nuclear industry.
Great. Paul?
Just one brief comment that I'd make. I think, looking at what Thomas Friedman is now calling the hyperconnectivity of society that we're working in, the type of innovation, we were talking earlier about innovation coming out of Silicon Valley, maybe out of the northeast of the US or even out of London, the type of innovation that's happening and with the tools that are available for anyone, whether it's a student in Nairobi, someone in a rural village in Tanzania. There is just such a different pace right now of innovation that's taking place. So I think in that context, technology is this great enabler that not only is connecting us, but is also going to be driving a much more rapid evolution of business models and innovation as well.
Mm-hmm. Great. So Justin, you were asked which of the 5 different options that David laid out would be most pertinent from an oil and gas perspective in terms of moving the system forward, with a particular emphasis on this notion of stranded assets and the current lack of valuation of a lot of the oil and gas companies in stock markets with regards to a carbon price, and that market capitalizations really do not reflect the carbon liability that's sitting there. So any reflections?
I had a few other things in the question as well. But, I think in terms of the 5 points that David made, I think what David's talking about is a system change in terms of sort of how financial institutions are valuing companies. Clearly, and all of those things will affect how companies are performing. And right now, you have a real issue where, and this is probably something that changed as well in the last 10 years, people really thought carbon was coming, and carbon was going to be a real driver of kind of how energy companies had to act. Now, the carbon markets, for one reason or another, but mostly because of a lack of political will, have been a little bit of a damp squid, and so you haven't had any of that pressure on the companies. And right now, you get the same kind of dialogue with the leaders of the energy sector saying, well, the same as David said, this is not the highest priority. When we speak to politicians want to speak to us about jobs and growth. They don't want to speak to us about carbon. So there's a sense that the whole thing has been put back. I would say, some of these opportunities don't underestimate just how much could be achieved with biological sequestration. Some of the estimates are very, very significant. But I'm not talking about a license for fossil fuels to carry on ad infinitum, but just the length of time. The energy infrastructure is so huge, it's simply going to take several decades before you get any kind of transition. That can be forced, it can be forced more rapidly, it will cost more money. Right now, there isn't the appetite for that. But it's about how do you actually buy more time, because what we're really worried about is atmospheric CO2 concentration. So if you can lower that anyway, we should be taking it. And so my argument was really, we should be doing both of these things. But absolutely, you get the 5 points that David said, that changes all of how these big companies operate.
Great, thank you. Do we have time for more questions, or I'm just going to keep going until I'm told to stop? Or do you want one more question? One more question. Okay. The man with all the awards.
Yes, hi, Tom. Sorry. Just very quick for David Blood. At the moment, the financial market resembles failing dictatorships around the planet. And we've got all these despots paying lip service to growth and jobs while entertaining themselves with an SME genocide on a large scale. And what I'm thinking is, we've seen some stuff happening from the sort of bottom-up movements, such as Crowdcube, Crowdmission in the UK, Kickstarter in the US, people power coming to the front. You are talking about talking to these despots and trying to reform the system from within, and we've seen the sort of same action in politics over the last 10 years. Generally speaking, things don't change until people power takes over. And what I'm asking you, isn't this time for some high-profile defections and actually joining with the ground-up movement in reforming the way the finance is really delivered to provide the growth for the economy? That's my question.
Thank you.
Well, I think there's no question that that the change will occur much more quickly through social media. And if there's any lessons that we've learned in the last 2 or 3 years is how quickly things can change. And I think that that's a wonderful opportunity frankly speaking. And so on balance, I would agree with you that if we can get more of a grassroots movement as part of this conversation, that will help us. I think the Occupy Wall Street, Occupy London, whatever you want to call it, is an extraordinarily important movement. And it will drive much of this change. And after saying all that, I do believe we're going to need to work within the system at this point, too. And I have greater influence, as my friend Mr. Elkington has informed me, with the folks that I came from, the investment bankers and the capital markets professionals. And I'm hoping that by partnering with many of you all, we can go from both the top down and the bottoms up.
Fantastic. Thank you. So can we thank the panel for their contribution? Thank you.